Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. This podcast is all about conversations about healing and rising from the ashes of your grief and trauma. In this podcast, we will be deconstructing and highlighting the different aspects of grief and loss. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Zampatella. Welcome to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. I'm excited about our who we're going to be speaking to today, which is Marcus Scarfo, and he is a counselor here at the Center for Grief and Trauma Therapy, and we're going to be talking about the use of art in navigating our grieving process. So welcome, Marcus.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you back, actually. Yeah. I was wondering if you might be able, for our viewers, be able to talk a little bit about what your background is, and
Sure.
a little bit about your training in art therapy, because some people here using art in therapy, and other people are
Right.
actually trained as art therapists. So maybe we can make that distinction and then kind of
Sure.
move into everything else.
Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. My background is in counseling and art therapy. Actually, my degree, let's reverse that, is art therapy and counseling. I have a master's degree from Drexel in art therapy and counseling. And so I do both art therapy and talk therapy. Now, I'd like to say up front that art therapists, we don't own the art, right? Like anyone can use art, but art therapy is a regulated profession. So art therapists have specific training. It requires a master's degree to even get the credentials required to call yourself an art therapist and to practice art therapy. That being said, anyone can use art therapeutically, but art psychotherapy, we're specifically using the art itself as the vehicle for the therapeutic process.
So I guess the important part that you just made a distinction about is that while you can find a therapist who is an art therapist, and you said regulated as in like a person's licensed
Right.
in art therapy because they've had supervision and they've had training and
Exactly.
education.
Right.
That doesn't preclude somebody who wants to use art in order to express and process their grieving. It doesn't preclude them from being able to utilize art in order
not at
to
all.
be able to to kind of move through the grieving process, which
Right.
is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the creative process in creating, and specifically visual art, it has, a ton of benefits. And anyone can experience those benefits, whether you are, working with an art therapist or just creating art on your own, in your home or, wherever.
When you say there's a ton of benefits, what do you mean by that? What are the benefits of using art in therapy?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones to me that stands out is that creating art provides what's called reflective distance.
What does that mean?
So it's the relationship with the art itself. So I, being the subject, creating an object, right? It's objective. So I'm creating this object, and that's an expression of something that I may be experiencing. We're able to view that, to witness the process itself, and to witness what we are creating with a bit more distance, and not to be so kind of overwhelmed or kind of consumed by whatever's happening, similar to what happens with, for example, mindful meditation. We are being the witness, the observer to the process and to the experience. And that, I think, helps a lot of people to approach things that may otherwise be just maybe too much, just too scary, right? To talk about with words, or to feel, to express emotion, right? Versus creating something that is an expression of that.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that this allows somebody to get close enough to what the painful emotions are, or the mixed emotions, or whatever that might be,
Right.
close enough to it without getting swallowed up by it.
Right.
But not so far away from it that they're disconnected from it.
Absolutely.
So that there's nothing going on. It's like a sweet spot there. They go from being like the like experiencer, so to speak, to more of like a witnesser. So from
Yes.
victim to witness. And so that gives them an opportunity to process things in a more safe way. That same thing happens in ritual too.
Yeah.
Like when I did my dissertation on the use of nature-based rituals with bereaved individuals, one of the things that came out was ritual does the same thing. You are doing something that allows you to be close enough to it to feel just enough to not be overwhelmed, and then but not so immersed in it that you're, or not so distanced from it that you're not getting anything,
Right.
from it. So that's interesting. I never really realized art would be have that same dynamic to it. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a big parallel there, right? And I think also as part of that kind of reflective distance and being the witness to that, we are more accustomed to filtering ourselves with words because that's how we typically communicate. Right? But when you're expressing something through art, it does kind of bring the filter down a little bit more, right? And so it's there, right? Like whatever, some people who are maybe have a little bit more technical training might be a little bit better at hiding things with art. But in general, we spend so much more time talking usually than we do creating art. And so there is less of that filter. It's more authentic oftentimes.
What do you mean authentic?
I feel more of a genuine expression of whatever you are experiencing typically than and sometimes words just aren't enough. There's something that gets lost in translation there because I believe that we think in images. I mean, we recognize our mother's face before we learn to say mama, right? Like imagery is so powerful. And in order for me to communicate to you with words, I have to go in my brain from image to thought to spoken language. And so there's two degrees there of translation, whereas if I am creating imagery, it's just raw. It goes right from what I'm experiencing internally to this expression.
So here we are with this raw experience, but not feeling overwhelmed by the raw experience at the
Exactly.
same time.
Right. So it can be authentic, but not as overwhelming in some ways.
That's cool. So how does a person choose which art medium to work with? Like if, let's say I was, I lost a parent and I decided I wanted to try to do something artistic, but this is just so new to me.
Right.
And I walk into an art supply store and I'm like, I'm going to walk right back out because there's just so much here. I don't even know where to start.
Sure.
So what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, talk about feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah,
We just were.
yeah.
Right?
Thanks.
Walking
I
into a
was
store and
already
seeing
feeling
all this
overwhelmed.
stuff.
Thank you for adding more overwhelmed
Right,
to
exactly.
me. Like, how do you where do you
Yeah.
start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I can provide a little bit more kind of direction there. Right?
Okay.
So art materials. There's a theory where that helps us to think about the experience they provide, falling on a spectrum, and that spectrum kind of up to interpretation, but goes from fluid to structured.
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is the fluid doesn't necessarily mean like literally fluid or liquid. The fluid to structured spectrum there refers to how easily or something is controlled or how difficult it is to control. So, for example, the most structured art material I can think of would be like a standard pencil, like a number 2 pencil, right? Because it's easy to control the line, the pressure of it. Wherever you put it down and make a mark, the mark's going to be there. It has an eraser. If you make a mistake, you can go back and erase it. It's very easy to control. An example of something that's much more fluid, for example, might be watercolor. Right? Like if I put watercolor on the paper and it's a little bit wet, it may start to kind of run somewhere, right? It might not. It's more difficult to control. It's more fluid in that way. And then you have everything kind of in between, right? So the more structured material is, the more easily it can be controlled, the more containment it provides, the more feelings of safety it has. They tend to be viewed as safer and provide kind of, it's just more approachable for a lot of people, right? And materials that are more fluid, they tend to be more, give more of an expressive kind of an experience, more in terms of your affect, what you're feeling and how you're showing emotion. They tend to have more of that kind of expression to them, but they can get a little bit sometimes regressive or overwhelming, if it's kind of feeling like you're losing control, right? So I would say, for example, if you want to have an experience that's soothing and grounding and safe and contained, to go with a more structured material. So I have some materials here, actually. I could show.
Yeah, definitely. Before you show me, because I'm very interested in this,
Yeah.
you keep saying contained. What does that mean?
Okay. So, when we're thinking about to use a clinical term, right? Containment of affect, right? What we're talking about
Which is
kind of like, right?
Heady, right?
Yeah, very. So to kind of put that in simpler terms, the emotional experience and expression of that, right? That's the affect. Containing that is like, okay, maybe I am just feeling overwhelmed with emotion. I'm just flooded, and I feel like I'm starting to maybe lose control. The containment would mean like, let's bring that in just a bit, like still be able to sit with it and experience it, but bring that to a level that's more tolerable, let's say.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think if I'm hearing you right, what I'm I'm thinking in my head, like I'm almost thinking of like a window.
Yeah.
And like what therapists would call an affective window, but let's just put this in like English, like a window. And then we have our emotions. And when your emotions are in a window that you can tolerate, you can still think about your emotions, you can still feel them, but you're not so overwhelmed like that you're shut down.
Exactly.
Or that you're sobbing uncontrollably, or that you're numb, or that you're turning to drugs and alcohol, or you're doing something to kind of get away from the emotions. So I know that when we can become like really overwhelmed, like you said, flooded, when you're flooded with emotion, when you're so activated, like your heart is racing, and it's almost like it's that fight and flight or freeze response where your heart's pounding and you're trying to get away from it. So I was thinking, as you were talking about that, like if we find ourselves getting into a place like that, we've gone a bit too far outside of our affective window, because now we're not thinking about things, we're just experiencing, and might not be able to even respond to what we're feeling. We're just reacting to what we're thinking and feeling. Or the other way around, where we dive down deep and you just become numb, or find ways to become numb, and you just shut down. And if you're shut down, you can't engage in it either. So if we stay in that window in some way, that will allow us to kind of experience our thoughts and feelings, emotions, and be able to do it in a way that isn't too overwhelming. Do I have that right?
Exactly.
So art helps that.
Art definitely helps.
Art totally helps that. Journaling can help that too, but that's another form. That's like almost like another art form, like that kind of. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
So show us.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I brought some different coloring materials here, and over here I have some that would be more structured.
Okay.
So coming back to that idea of them being more easy to control, right? If you're feeling flooded with emotion, right, you're already starting to feel out of control. You're taking something I have control of this, right? Like I can use this material on a page, know exactly where it's going to go. So, all right, crayons.
Okay.
Right? It's classic. Some people might be a little bit kind of turned away by these because they think it's like childish, but it is a structured material, and it has that benefit to it. And art can have a playful nature to it. Don't be afraid of that playful nature.
It might be healing, I would think, just because it feels sometimes so heavy that to have a little bit of playfulness can provide a little bit of healing. Because when you've got, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you got my brain like going a million miles a minute, and I'm already when I think about grief, and I think about how our brains can be all over the places, we're bouncing around with our emotions and whatnot. If we can find ways to have moments of joy, because that's the difference a lot of times between grief and depression, is that depression, there are not moments of joy. It's a steady like unhappiness. But with grief, there can be moments of joy and playfulness and happiness. It kind of goes up and down.
It's very wavy.
It is very wavy. So I think what I'm hearing you say is this might help with finding those joyful.
Sure.
Is this why sometimes people get, the coloring books, the adult coloring books? It's a structured way of.
Absolutely.
See, I am a total art therapist. I don't have to go to school. You wasted 2 years going to school, and in 15 minutes.
But you hit the nail on the head, though.
Okay.
That is why adult coloring books are so popular, and why they have such a soothing effect, because it provides that containment, and it's very structured. I mean, literal containment. Here are lines providing a container that I can color inside of, and it's success-oriented. Right? If I just color inside of these lines here with this picture that's provided for me, it gives me something to do, somewhere to channel this energy, and it's focused and it's structured and it's safe. And so there's that feeling of safety.
Yeah.
You have with a lot of intense emotions where your nervous system's very elevated, right? Anything that's going to give you feelings of safety is going to help to start to bring that down.
Right. So my mom-in-law, she meets my husband's grandmom, but she's my mom and I'm her favorite, so we're not going to tell anyway. But now everybody knows.
I won't tell anybody.
No, I'm sure when his family sees this,
Don't
they're
tell
going to be,
anybody
don't
that.
tell anybody. But that's like her gig. They took, she has a lot of physical problems, and they placed her into a home, and understandably so, and for her safety, and that's great.
Right.
But she lost everything all at once. Her home, she was there for I don't even know how many years, and the memories that she had, and all of her Santa Clauses that she had, she put out and I mean, there's so much loss in such a short period of time. And then she's in this like one bed in a room with like this little tiny TV. I mean, I don't even know if I would have been able to bounce back, but I'll tell you what, those adult coloring books, they have, like, that's her gig. It's very soothing for her, and she's, she's really good at it. And you look at it, and she doesn't like overthink the colors. No. She doesn't overthink things. I think she just kind of like finds a place to kind of channel some of the feelings that she has. And I mean, she's like 96 years old. So we're not talking about, this is for kids.
No.
For everyone. There is no age range here.
For art.
For crayons.
Yeah, for crayons.
Which I call it crowns forever. And my husband has made it very clear that it's not crowns, it's crayons. And I said, we're outside of Philadelphia, it's crowns. No, it's not working.
I'm not going to lie, I called them crowns when I was a kid too.
They're totally crowns, in case you're wondering. No
judgment here.
No
Whatever
judgment.
You call them.
See, they're therapists. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so
crowns.
Yeah, so
crayons.
Gotcha.
Got me saying it again. That's one structured material.
Okay.
All right. Another one is markers.
I'm a fan of the marker.
Fan of the marker?
Yeah.
Yeah. Markers are great too. They do provide control. Colors are pretty vibrant. Right.
They bleed sometimes.
They can.
Is there a certain kind you should get?
Well, I'm a fan of the super tips. That's what these are called.
Super tips.
Am I allowed to say brand names and stuff? I'm not endorsing brands, but this is what I use.
You're holding it up. You might as well say it.
Okay. So Crayola makes these markers called super tips.
Yeah.
What I like about them is that, let's see, let's just take out this blue one here. It's not a fine tip, but it's not the really thick one.
Yeah.
Right, so you can set it on its side and make like a wider mark, or you can kind of angle it
Gotcha.
up and have more control. So something like this will give you a bit more control than, like the big chunky markers.
And options.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So I do like them. I mean, is there any way to absolutely stop markers from bleeding? Probably
certain
not.
Paper or anything.
Right, maybe some paper.
Okay.
Depending on what you use. But overall, they are more on the structured side, less so than something like crayons.
Okay.
Right. Colored pencils. So love colored pencils. They are, of these three, probably the most structured.
Oh. Okay.
It's because similar to a pencil, right? It gives you more control over the line and everything. But they do take longer to color in. It's definitely a practice in patience. more so with colored pencil. Like you can fill in a coloring page pretty quickly with markers.
Okay.
Whereas colored pencils take a little bit more time. Colors can be vibrant if you press hard, or if you go light. You have a little bit of a lighter, more pastel kind of effect to them. So they also provide control in that way. But all of these are structured, safe type of materials that provide that containment.
Okay, cool.
So, and that's why these are usually the ones that, like, if you buy in kits, they'll typically come with the coloring books.
Oh, okay.
They don't usually give coloring books with these next couple that I'm going to show you.
Okay.
These are pastels. They're another coloring material, two different kinds here. These are oil pastels. I really like oil pastels. Obviously, as the name suggests, they're oil-based. They can smear and smudge a little bit, but I like that for blending. But it is more of a fluid material. Even though this is something that's kind of somewhat dry, it's still considered fluid because it's not about how wet something is, it's about the level of control you have. So this these are very vibrant. It's basically just pigment that's been kind of compressed in this oil base. Really good for expressing emotion, but not quite as structured. So they can sometimes be a bit flooding, so something to be conscious of.
I noticed that you have a book there.
Yes.
Can you, like, you don't have to
You wanna see
draw,
what it looks like?
if you want to see my stick figure, we can do that certainly,
Right.
but just like the difference in like what it looks like.
Sure. So.
Because I don't know about you, but I know that not a whole lot of people. Oh, okay, so it's pretty,
So
and it's thick.
It's thick. It's
Okay.
very. If you press hard, you get this really vibrant kind of effect with the colors. What's nice about that is you can blend them if you kind of run them over each other.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. But if I'm drawing or coloring and I'm resting my hand on something, all right, let me flip it this way, and I'm kind of moving my hand, you can see it may not be like real right to the camera, but you can see it's starting to kind of like smudge a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right there, you saw like this little bit of a tail that came off from a little bit of another color that was on there. That kind of stuff can happen.
Okay.
Right. So they are a little bit messier. So not quite as much control.
Unless you're feeling messy.
If
Like,
you
what
want
if
to
you're
be
just
messy, let's make a
feeling
mess.
messy with your emotions? Like,
That's what I like these for. Like, big piece of paper, and if the idea is I want to be able to get this energy out, this is a good cathartic release of energy.
I don't need to do anything. I can just
No,
do whatever
I'm
the heck I want.
I'm not trying to stay in these
Right.
lines. I'm not trying to create something specific. I just want to get the energy out. You can get some really nice, vibrant colors and be able to make a mess and let yourself go a little bit.
So it's not about the product.
No, not
It's
at
about
all.
the process.
It's about the process. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. I definitely want to come back to
Yeah,
that.
we're going to come back.
Yeah. And then this, I would say, of drawing materials, is the most fluid one.
Okay. And what is it?
These are pastels as well, but these are chalk pastels. Similar feel to chalk. They're very kind of powdery. So if I do this one on here, you can see already there's some chalk dust coming down there, right? I'll make it for the camera
So
a bit
needless to
bigger.
say, maybe want to do this in a place where, you know,
Yep.
you're not
That's going.
getting it.
These are going to make a mess.
Yeah.
Some people love these. Some people hate them.
Okay.
But even if I do this, you can see it's
Yeah.
going all over the page there.
Now what are you going to do with all that?
I'm just going to rub it on my hands. I'm accustomed to getting messy. I'm an art therapist. Come on. But some people don't like the mess, right? And so, that's why it's good to consider what type of materials you want to use.
Can I give you like a whole little like squirrel moment that I just
Sure.
had? So
The squirrel moment.
when I was in Portland and at the Portland Institute for Loss and Transition, I was getting trained by Bob Niemeyer, who we're actually going to be hearing from tomorrow.
Okay.
Well, the episode will be recorded tomorrow. So he has this intervention. It's called photo narratives, and photo narratives, which I'll get into, is like basically you're taking your phone around,
Right.
this is another form of art without a doubt, right?
Absolutely.
You take your
Photography.
phone around and you're like, oh, that lamp reminds me of Damien, my brother. It reminds me of Damien. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to take a picture of it, and I can bring it into my therapist. I can just look at it myself. But there's something like seeing things in your environment, getting out of your head in order to see things in your environment and like take these photos. And it's like a whole like intervention that they call it. It's
Right.
taking pictures. Okay, we'll put a fancy name on it. But those, what you just used, when I was there, they had an expressive arts room, and they were like teaching us how to use this. And I remember I went into the expressive arts room, and as soon as I saw them, I knew exactly I had to take a picture of it. So I came back, and then you processed it with, the person you were with. And so, of course, I drug my best friend up there. So I'm looking at Katie, and I'm like, yeah, I took this. And she's like, why? And I was like, Christmas Day. It's like a whole memory came. So Christmas Day, which is weird. That's the day he died too, but not that day. But I was 14, he was 10. Stockings were like this huge big deal in our family. Like my mom would wrap everything.
Okay.
She wrapped lollipops and just random stuff. I think it's because we
Everything
were poor, and she was just like, let me make this Tootsie Roll, let me run, just make it best out of it. So we used to get each other stuff, and so I'm taking everything out, and I open up my stocking, and there's a pile of that kind of chalk at the bottom of my stocking, messing up my stocking that I'm supposed to be using next year. And
how'd you feel about that?
well, let me tell you, I was like, who put chalk at the bottom of my stocking? And he was 10. He was like as proud as could be. He was like, that was me. And I'm like, okay, like why didn't you keep it in the box? He goes, made it look like there was more. And he was right. It looked like there was a whole bunch. So here you are, you're just showing me the art stuff. And it's already like, here I am able to share with you like this bittersweet memory I have of him, which as we're moving through the grieving process and learning how to integrate that loss, because you don't end grief, right?
No.
You just integrate it into your new, whatever your new normal is. Bittersweet memories is a huge component to that. And that all just came from you showing me that.
From seeing
that.
From a visual.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, if you're working with clients, have you ever seen anybody go, even with, I don't know, a parent, like, because we talked about bereaved parents before. Oh yeah, my son used to color, and like, does that kind of stuff come out? Like, even when you're using the materials with people?
Yeah.
So it just, like, even just the materials will bring up stuff.
It's just the working materials or seeing them, right? Or sometimes drawing something and maybe them having a new association to something that they noticed in their drawing, right?
Oh, wow.
Now, I know I say that it's about the process and not the product, which is true. The process is the most important part. But sometimes that just the witness, it's not just witnessing the process itself, but being a witness to what you've created can bring things up in associations.
Oh, that's cool.
Right? Now, I don't interpret or analyze art or tell people what it means. I like to help people to find their own meaning in their art. You're the creator. That's what's important, what it means to you. But that's another benefit to the creative process, is that you create something tangible. And so if you were to go back years later and you look at it, right, this is not subject to the imperfections of memory. Here it is. Right? So when you see something, you might be like, oh, that's where I was at that time. Right? It just hits you. It's different than trying to think back and remember something, or even reading it in words. It's just like you said, just seeing that.
It's like this picture. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Phoenix Rising with Dr. Z. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it, subscribe, and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts. We want to be a resource for anyone who's experiencing loss, and this is a simple way you can help us spread the word. Check out our show description. There you'll find a link to connect with me on social media, as well as helpful articles and resources.